the third hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Heidi Siegmund Cuda, who is the author and Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, the co-host of the Radicalized Truth Survives podcast. She has a Substack over at Betty Dangerous, B-E-T-T-E, dangerous.com. And I believe also at bylinesupplement.com. Heidi, welcome back to the program. Are you building an empire over on Substack here?
Trying. Thanks so much for having me back, Tom. Yeah, I like to stay busy. I always feel better when I'm writing.
Me too. Me too. So you've got two websites?
Yeah, Betty Dangerous, BETTE.com, which is where I do a lot of my personal investigative work. And then I also work for a team out of the UK called Byline Times and Byline Supplement. And we are bringing that to America this year. So lots of good news, all reader-funded stuff. And I think it's very important in a time of grave deception to be reader-funded. So I'm thrilled.
I'm with you. So in this most recent piece that you wrote for BylineSupplement.com, Breaking the GOP Death Grip, What Other Countries Define Authoritarianism Can Teach the U.S., I want to get to that part of what other countries can teach us in just a second. But you start out by pointing out how 2 years ago there was this big movement for California secession, and that this was actually an operation run out of Moscow. Tell us about that.
It's always the same thing, and that was actually quite a few years ago, but they always replay the same playbook over and over again. There are these activists who spring out of nowhere, they mobilize people, and suddenly California, there's a movement to secede. You can always trace it back to Moscow. Inevitably, the person who actually led this movement not only had an office, a home base in Moscow, but you can look at what Dana Rohrabacher was doing at the time, mobilizing people. Who was he hanging out with, raising money with? Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks. It's always the same players. So, of course, when I look at what's happening in Texas, and we look at the massive amount of astroturfing that goes on, it's again the same playbook. We've seen it in California. We saw them dark money operatives try to take our governor. We see what happened a decade ago in Crimea, where, in 2014, Russia invades Ukraine, and the astroturfing and active measures involved made the world very confused about what was actually going on. It's not confusing to me at all what's going on. So
now we've got, also you reported on this rolling insurrection, how Putin is waging a covert war against the West. How much of what we're seeing right now in terms of opposition to the Ukraine war in the United States is being driven by the troll farms out of St. Petersburg?
And St. Petersburg, and they're rooted in Africa. Wagner moved its operation to places in Africa. I would say that the most important lens to put on all of this is there are no rear areas in an information war. That is directly out of the Russian playbook. It's cheap. It's easy to find compromised people to deliver your propaganda. As you know, Tom, I've been doing a series looking back on 2016. In October of 2016, 17 of our federal and civilian agencies said that we were being hit by Russia. And what is Trump saying and Roger Stone saying? There's no Russia. Right. What is Hillary Clinton saying in debates? We are being attacked by Russia. So it's not like we don't know this. It's simply that the dark money funding propaganda from the Kremlin network and the Council for National Policy networks, all of this related to what you were just talking about, which is fossil fuel versus the inevitable renewables future. Fossil fuel is funding so much of this. And unfortunately, what we see in Congress is theater, a group of white supremacists, white nationalists, taking over foreign policy in order to deliver another win for Putin in Ukraine. There's no way to not see the connections. It's right in front of us. It's simply that, the propaganda of Russia happened to be very effective.
Well, and Putin has now launched a war against gay people in Russia, particularly trans people, and he's launched a war against people who don't proclaim Christianity. Again, that's just perfectly integrated into the American right. Do you think that Mike Johnson, realizes the extent to which he's dancing to Putin's tune, or he's just willing to put up with it because, obviously it's all coming via Donald Trump?
Well, it's very interesting because, of course, he does. And when you look at our Congress, you have to see that this is a group of people on the GOP front that has been captured by Putin. I call them U.S. Putinists. All you have to do, as I said recently, is look and see who benefits. And we just saw Ron DeSantis recently create another staged horror event dealing with trans people and licenses in Florida. And this is actually leading to an exodus of people who don't feel safe there anymore.
Right.
It is all part of the same war. It is all part of the authoritarian capture. And this is something that is very important, why shows like yours are so important, because 2024 is going to be one staged horror event after another. And if we don't go on offense pretty soon, we are going to continually be on our back foot. And we have to see this as part of the entire war that's been going on for a decade.
I think you're absolutely right. Now, in your article, you talk about countries where people are pushing back, specifically in Germany, people pushing back against AfD, this new, it's now the second largest party in Germany, which is kind of the heir to the old Nazi party with a wink and a nod. And in Slovakia, where people are defying the pro-Russian prime minister. Tell us about these examples.
Well, first, I have to tell you that the only reason that investigation exists is because of what you wrote in one of your articles about Poland. So it's very important to note that your work impacts my work, and all of us doing this work are connected. So you had written how Poland actually turned off a populist network that was feeding Russian propaganda. You also noted that the new head of Poland arrested some of the previous members. And so that to me was like, wait, we need to look and see what other countries are doing. And it wasn't hard to find really good examples. The point I want to make initially is that raging against the Twitter machine will not save our democracy. Labor of democracy is what's going to save it. And so people, yes, we can all unite on places like Twitter and we can find our allies, but this requires real labor. And in Germany, mass protests are occurring against their extremist party because they've been there before. Germany also has an anti-fascist police force. We at Radicalized Truth Survives podcast hear from members of law enforcement all the time who have either retired early or are so frightened because their entire force has become captured by QAnon, including their superiors. So wow. Germany has the sense to have an anti-fascist police force. Guess what also Germany did? Germany arrested its coup plotters. We still have our coup plotters at the highest level running around radicalizing people. And if I sound a little upset right now, it's because I continually lose people in my own life to the MAGA QAnon merger, the MAGA QAnon cult merger, where people their minds are being hacked to believe conspiracies. So we have a lot to learn from Germany. And Estonia, I'd like to bring up if I have a moment.
Please.
They're actually expelling their religious extremists. They just kicked out the head of the Russian church. You know why? Because that religious extremist is delivering Russian propaganda, poisoning people in their places of worship. And we need to do the same thing. We need to, seal off our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I am totally with you. Heidi Cuda, the websites, did I just lose my audio? No, it's okay, there we go. The websites are bylinesupplement.com and Betty Dangerous, BETTE dangerous.com. And Heidi, great work you're doing. Keep it up. And thanks so much for dropping by today.
Back at you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a few moments. Stay with us.